Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Safe Conversations. And we're thrilled to have you join with us. And Paul, how are you doing today?
This is a good day where the bubble is in the middle, not high, not low. You and I have talked some. With my history, I kind of go up and down, so I'm in the good zone today.
I hear you. That sounds good. I'm not real fond of your bubble in the middle.
Bubble in the middle.
Yeah, it's just kind of. Yeah, but I hear you. I understand
just don't
what that
pop
means.
it.
Don't
Leave
pop
it
the
alone.
bubble.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah. Well, doing good and tackling a really difficult subject today. Last conversation we did was we kind of introduced the subject of abuse,
Right.
particularly sexual abuse, and as we stated, this is a huge deal on the national scene right now.
Yeah, it's massive.
It really is. And the Me Too movement, and it's, of course, we both grew up in church, and so both of the churches and organizations we grew up in, both of them are
Right.
investigated right now for multiple cases of sexual abuse. Minors by church leaders, and so that's serious. Maybe we can talk about that at some point. But, Paul, I wanted to kind of get into this today because, we can go so many different directions with this.
Yep.
But I want to focus in a little bit on, because we were talking and I was thinking, if you're a parent watching this and you're seeing what happens, because from my understanding, most sexual abuse takes place from somebody that the child knows. It's not like a stranger.
Yeah, it's an alarming. Growing up, we kind of had the idea it's the bad guy in the alley back there that's doing that, but it's not true.
It is not true. And it's that person that they love and they trust that often is the
Trust
perpetrator.
is a key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're, God forbid this were to ever happen to somebody's child, but it does happen. And we read the statistics last time. It happens in an alarming rate, to be honest with you.
Yes.
So what are they looking for? I mean, if you were to talk to some parents right now, and what would you tell them? Here's some things that you might look for in a child that might not be feel safe to talk about it, or may feel too ashamed or whatever. But is there something parents could look for?
Well, before they look, taking a reflective perspective on what the relationship with the child looks like. Like, is there an emotional connect with the child? Has the parent been real busy the last 2 or 3 months and that connection's not there? Has it not been established well? What people could look at on the web is look at secure attachment or insecure attachment. They'd get a lot of data about what that may look like, and they could assess a little bit what the relationship with the child looks like. Let's assume it's a good attachment, secure, and it's in place. Then they're already having emotional attunement to the child. That would be part of what's going on. And I would tell that parent to continue doing what they're doing, which is being aware of the child's up and downs, noticing things that are different. If you've got a child that's very gregarious and becomes very quiet, you're looking for changes, because there are children that are true introverts. They don't need to have something to say all the time. But if that introversion becomes worse, or all of a sudden they're not playing with their brothers and sisters, which they usually do, or if they all of a sudden become very angry very easily, what they're going to deal with, the child's going to be experiencing shame. We won't know how they're expressing it, whether that's anger or avoidance or compliance. Yeah. And it would be great if the parents had already had a conversation about appropriate touch. One way to do that is to take, if it's a little boy, take his swimming trunks and hold them up in front of him and say no one should put their hands in your swimming trunks. Remind him that if he's of a certain age, that his mom and dad may have to help clean him up and all that, or his grandparents. But that's not appropriate. With a girl, you need something for her top as well, but also for her bottoms. And that needs to be done beforehand. Personal experience, we had already taught my son this, and we had, he was 4. We moved into an apartment because I was going to be teaching at a small seminary in the Dallas area. And he came running in there one day and said this little boy's name, who's about 3 years older than him, tried to touch me in my private area. We had taught him private area. So he felt protected. He felt guarded. He felt secure enough to come and say. And parents could expect that if you've done some of that groundwork. If you hadn't, don't guilt yourself over that. You know.
Do you mind my asking how you handled that? I mean, what did you do when he?
I wanted to go beat the kid up. Now you know my background too. That I have an abusive background, so that didn't help me either. I realized.
Was this an older child? I'm sorry.
About 3 years older than my son. He was 7 or so. My son was 4. Yeah. I talked to the little boy. Here's the sad thing, Fred. His daddy had touched him. That's what he said. I learned that from my daddy. I learned that from my family. So, and but we had no idea of knowing where he lived, who he was with, or anything like that. There was no way to report that, but sad to say, because it should be reported.
Yeah. So, well, I thought that was very helpful, to be honest, of what parents can do to teach them. And you're talking about a child that's 3-4 years old that you're actually having this conversation with.
Yes, and you do it age appropriate, like just holding up their pants or shorts or something, so that they need visual examples, because they're just getting enough word and language, so as many senses as you could use with them. And I suggest to parents that they use anatomically correct language when they're talking about their children. Okay. So it's a penis, it's a vagina, and I would use that language even though the grandparents chewed us out for that.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a totally different approach because, nobody talked about that when we were kids.
Because if there is an abusive situation, they're going to use anatomically correct dolls and language with the child to assess it. Yeah. That's why it's important. It's preventative.
Okay.
Just a heavy topic, isn't it?
It is heavy. It is so heavy, and there's a sadness that it seems necessary. Like that information you just gave, I'm thinking is incredibly helpful to parents. Parents need to know how to do this because what we're, too often hearing about, again, it's this person at school, it's the person at church, it's family, I wanted to ask you, I wanted to bring up something that I don't know, I don't hear it discussed much. So safe conversation. So here it goes. Paul, what are you thinking? Have you done research on this? Is this part of the, your clinical studies? Mm-hmm. It seems like as a part of the breakdown of the family and the bringing together of the blended family, okay? And I know I'm focusing just within the family right now and has nothing to do with church, school, or outside. I'm talking about within the family. And you bring in a stepfather who didn't hold that little baby in his arms as a little baby.
Right.
And now he's looking upon 13, 14-year-old young lady that's not really his daughter. And I know maybe that's unfair. I'm just asking now. Yeah. Is that, part of the danger and the increase that we see of sexual abuse within the home?
Well, it's good to talk about it because it's a common stereotype. I think to say the category of stepfather, that's always true, is probably naive because people have character. Yeah. And what character is practicing of thinking and feeling and acting over their whole life, going back to when they were so young they really couldn't think. They just felt and had sensations and images. So what I would say is the best predictor of a person's behavior is their history. Now, if they're working on it, for instance, like an alcoholic, that might be an easy one. If an alcoholic is working on their alcoholism, they're saying, I'm going to AA groups, or I'm willing to say that I am an alcoholic, or I have friends that are trying to help me. They can tell you what they're doing in the change process. So if you have a lustful man who's been looking at child pornography, who becomes a stepfather, yes, I would say he's prone to that. But I would say a dad is too if he was doing that. If his history was that.
So you're saying, wait a minute, back up a little bit, simply because it needs to be said, simply because somebody's a stepfather doesn't at all mean they're susceptible to this. It's more of a character issue.
No. And another part of this is what's called in the sexual abuse education area grooming, where a person literally that would be a pedophile, someone who's an abuser, comes to a church, comes to a family, and begins to connect and very meticulously over time builds trust. That was the word we talked about earlier. To the point that they will have access to a child. They will become a friend of a family, begin to babysit. Where the church is vulnerable is who doesn't need children's workers?
Right.
I mean, that's just who doesn't need volunteers today in the way our organizations are, churches or otherwise. So it makes us very vulnerable. But there is an intentionality, and I would say at that point it becomes a type of evil because this person has aligned themselves so much with that now they are like a predator. They're looking, they're hunting, and it's you would have to have backbone and nerve to take on that idea, because then you have to expose Uncle Billy or Deacon Donnie or Sister Susie. You know what I'm saying? At that point, and I think that's what keeps people from reporting. And I'm a report guy. It just should be reported. It's wrong. There's nothing right about it. It doesn't reflect the kingdom of God in any way. Right. Both parties need help. It's just my strengths are with helping the one that's abused, not the perpetrator. And I just admit that to everybody. I don't do well with that.
Right. Well, let's turn there for a minute. Let's talk now to the individual we're not talking parents and how to prevent, or unless there is something else you could say, hey, I need to say something else to parents.
I think those are basic things, and I think there's so much good stuff out there on the web with some of the places that they could find more.
Real quick, what would you say to the parent right now that's listening to this and all of a sudden they're like, oh my goodness, could you say something to parents to balance the anxiety, to not be overly?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there something that you might be able to say about that?
Know your children well. I mean, I say that sounds so simplistic, but the busyness today and the activities that are going on and the stresses of life, we just get in these routines and we become what I think is mindless. And when you're mindless, you lose intentionality. Intentionality is very important. It's almost like we need to have a way to check in with intentionality once a week. Like, so how am I doing? Am I just in this sort of cruise mode, or am I living intentionally and more purposefully?
Yeah, very good. But I think even to the parent who might say, I felt like I was pretty in tune. It's just that there are situations that occur that the parent there really wasn't anything they could do.
No, they can't. No, and let me correct what I may have said. They can't do anything about if there's an abuse situation. I'm saying the attunement and the connection and the knowing the child is foundational. So what you then notice is the differences.
Right.
The only way to notice the differences is if there's sort of a baseline of sorts. Parents don't need to be hyper-vigilant, but they do need to be vigilant. Right. We live in a culture that is very self-oriented, and these type people, I think you read the stat on our last Safe Conversations, but they don't stop. These people don't stop. So right. Who are your kids hanging out with? It also becomes a challenge for parents about whose family should I let my child go to their homes, because it sounds like you need to know those parents and just being vigilant like that.
Yeah. So to the parent, we're followers of Jesus. We're trying to participate in the kingdom here, and that kingdom is love and joy and peace and righteousness, and That's what, we want to be those kind of people.
Yep.
But we're inundated with the information I started with, the statistics, the news stories, the 24-hour news cycle. And what do you say to the parent that's going, I'm just getting to the point where this is all I think about. I'm so concerned. I'm so scared, maybe a little too anxious. How can a parent go into this world and not become consumed with the evil?
Yes.
Potential evil, I should say. So anything to say to that parent?
I don't. I would want to guard those parents from hearing a simplistic statement of trust God, where sometimes we say those type statements to protect ourselves, not help somebody.
I agree.
But there really is a trust God that needs to go on within the parent learning to give care to their child. There really is a recognition that I don't have control of all that's going on. I would say this about reality. The reality is that we're in a very a culture where predators really are around. They're not monitored as well, especially in Christian circles. That's what your denomination and mine's having to face right now. But I would tell the parent that reality is always your friend. You cannot move unless you're in reality. You cannot move from a delusional reality because that's not accurate. Right. So the reality is it is out there. What are the things you can do? If I were telling them, if they were a car driver and we're talking about how to be safe, I'd say seatbelt's a good thing. That doesn't guarantee everything, but it is a good measure. I would say, what are reasonable measures? We've talked about some of those. Yeah. Do those things and trust your child to God.
I love the illustration with the car. I think that's very helpful because there's risks involved and you can't stop.
No, and I do think there is a certainty I would like to have that's not there.
Reasonable measures.
Reasonable measures.
Just reasonable measures. And well, I think what we'll do, even though we're close to the time, I think I would like to save, Paul, if it sounds good, let's save the conversations about the adult who's now has, maybe all the news is coming out about sexual abuse and they're reliving.
Yes.
And where do they go for help? And let's talk
Yes.
about that adult who experienced that, and we'll do that next time. We've got more time with it. So, all right. Thank you, everyone.